Hello, everyone. Welcome to Empower Your Relationships. It's a new podcast. My name is Deborah, and I'm here with Dr. Rob.
Nice
And
to be
we're
here.
so glad you're here joining us in this series of conversations about becoming empowered in your life, love, and work relationships. We'll be answering your questions and talking about what it takes to be authentic
Mm.
and true to yourself while creating healthy, empowering, and fulfilling connections in your life.
And getting home before dinner.
So let's get started.
Yeah.
This topic of today's episode is how your childhood impacts your love life.
That's right. So if you've been wondering how the hell did you get to this place, you can blame your parents.
Yes, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. So some of you may know or may not know, but Dr. Rob and I have just launched our new Empower Your Relationships coaching.
Mm.
And it's for women who want personal coaching, self-coaching, and how to create and cultivate relationships in all areas of their life. And I mention this because we're launching our first ever love coach certification. And so we've been getting so many questions about love, romantic love relationships. So we
Mhm.
thought it would be great to just kick off our first episode of this new podcast with a love question. So are you ready, Rob? Let me read the question.
Let's do it.
Okay. Hi, Debbie and Dr. Rob. My boyfriend of 6 years just told me that he needs a break from our relationship. This is my fourth long-term relationship where a boyfriend has suddenly wanted to end things, go on a break, but then we never get back together. I am devastated. I don't understand why I keep getting into these relationships with good men who ultimately abandon me. I've tried not to push when they've said they're not ready for marriage, but I feel like when I try to move forward with living together, they just run. Why am I always being abandoned, Cheryl? Well, thank you, Cheryl, for that question. We definitely have some answers for you. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah. So if you were one of our clients,
Mhm.
and let me just preface this because some people might not know us. Although we're both trained in therapeutic techniques, we're presenting a coaching model
Mhm.
of relationships.
Mhm.
So it's not therapy.
And so one of the things that we teach, our work is based on Jungian psychology, Eastern wisdom, and Jung talked a lot about the psyche.
Mm.
And as most people know who study psychology, is that so much of our life is formed when we were younger.
Yeah, it all points back to early childhood experiences.
Mhm.
Now, imagine this. Go back to when you were 2 years old.
Wow.
From 2 to about 6 years of age, that's when a lot of this stuff happens.
Mm.
So it's really early on because a lot of people tell us, well, my relationship with my parents is really good now, you know. But of course, it's recent and it's
Yeah.
now. What we're talking about, the influence that really happens in childhood is very early on.
And I want to preface this also by saying that we're not saying that you had a trauma in your childhood. A lot of people think they had a pretty decent child. Most of us have normal, average childhoods. We've had, bullying and, natural things that happen as kids, being punished, being left at the supermarket, little things like that. And so every single person, whether the parent is the perfect parent or a terrible parent or somewhere in between, we're impacted by our experience with them. And
Mhm.
we basically look at them as role models for how do we do life. So it's whether they're good or bad, they're basically the template for which we decide about our personality, how we fit in, how we relate to the world. And so when it comes to love, we have to kind of look at a pattern and say, well, that pattern didn't begin with when you started dating. There's something that unconsciously is influencing that pattern. So I want to say, first of all, a lot of people tell me, oh, did I do something wrong? Like when she said, did I push too much? I try to hold back. In
Mm.
relationships, the results of the relationship has nothing to do with what you did inside that relationship. It's not about how cool you were or how pushy you were or, if you played the game right. It's really happens way before that. And we talk about this idea of the pre-attraction mindset. And what we're bringing into the relationship is what we want to look at. And that comes from childhood.
Yeah, so a couple of ideas that we work with from psychology. One is that your mind, the patterns that you observe in your life are really arising from your mind,
Mm,
because the way we experience it is the opposite.
mm,
The way it appears to us is that we're seeing a world out there and it's happening to us, and then we're reacting or
mm,
responding somehow. Jungian psychology says the opposite. We're essentially experiencing our own projection.
mm.
And that's a difficult idea for a lot of people to accept. But let's just suppose, for Cheryl's sake, that there's some truth to this,
Mm.
that the pattern she is seeing is essentially arising from her own psychology.
And actually, Cheryl, you are really onto something because you say, "What am I doing wrong?"
Mm.
Which you're not doing anything wrong, but you're saying, "I see a pattern here." Which a lot of people, for me, it took me years to figure out that I had a pattern. I
Yeah.
was like, "Huh, I keep picking men that aren't available. That's why." So I think it's great that you recognize there's a pattern and that there's something in you that's creating that pattern. The problem is I think you think the pattern is in what you're doing, the behavior you're exhibiting in the relationship. There's something that you're doing to turn them off, and that is not true. It's you're actually picking people who will abandon you unconsciously. So it's like you're picking a person. We always talk about the script that we hand the scripts out to people to play out for us. So unconsciously, you're picking these people, and so let's talk a little bit about how that happens. Like why do we pick these why are we picking these people, Cheryl? Let's figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah. So we come to the second idea, which is that our parents left a powerful emotional imprint on our emotional mind.
Mhm.
Now, I emphasize emotion because remember, we're 2, 3, 4 years old. So we're not really thinking through things,
Mhm.
but we're absorbing them emotionally.
Mhm.
We're taking a snapshot of the emotional environment in our household and internalizing it.
Mm.
That internalization of what is happening in the household, particularly with our mothers, is really crucial. It
Mm.
leaves a powerful unconscious imprint that we carry on into life.
And one of the most powerful concepts that we teach is this idea of the love persona type. So we there for women, and men have this types too, but for women, we're going to talk about there's 4 types. There's the mother wife type, there's the lover type, there's the warrior or the professional type, the woman that goes out and makes things happen in the world. And then there's the mystical type, the spiritual woman,
Mhm.
the person that bridges unconscious and spirit and matter together, the person that's intuitive. And as women, we all have four of them. But what happens is that during early childhood, we decide on a role and make this kind of a role, and we stick to one primarily. So, for example, Cheryl, I would think that you're probably the lover type. And the reason I'm saying that is because I can recognize myself as the lover type. The lover is the type of person that's in love with love. She loves like her central point of life. And I'm making assumptions here. I don't really know anything else from your question. But when I was single and I kept getting those unavailable people, it was because I was focused so much on finding a man that I made the man my whole life. But in a way, there's an aspect of me that wanted independence too,
Mhm.
that wanted to not depend on the man because I saw what happened when I was younger and my mother being the wife type. And I just basically took on the lover. And so, quite simply, we, as a lover, the lover's qualities are like a free spirit. They have passion. They fall in love very easily. And then they also fall out of love very easily. And if they're pursuing men that are always leaving, they never get a chance to be the rejecter. But if someone comes on strong, I guarantee you, if guy comes on strong with you, you probably run. A guy who really wants a commitment, you probably find something wrong with him. And you may not even notice that pattern. but I invite my clients all the time to do that. And for me, when I finally got out of that lover, I was the fun Debbie. So I created this persona of someone who wanted to have a good time, and I was cool, and I didn't want a commitment, and I was really, having I was being easygoing, and I don't want to push too hard for
I
a
think I met
commitment.
you at spring break.
And what happened was I kept attracting men who that's all they wanted. So my persona was actually putting out this idea that I didn't want a commitment, and I was afraid to ask for it because that commitment was somehow didn't fit in what I wanted to
Mm.
portray, and I felt like there was something wrong with that. And then when they run, it's usually just you finally being true to yourself, and that true self that's asking for that commitment is who you really are. But you have to get in touch with her first before you go out and attract people, because if you're attracting on the persona level, the surface level, you're going to keep getting the same results. So, without getting into too much teaching of our work, the persona, how would you describe it, Rob?
Yeah, so if we go back to that early childhood experience where we kind of get a snapshot of the emotional environment that's going on around us in the family situation, we internalize that,
Mhm.
and then we use that to construct a viable persona for ourselves. And the persona is simply like a mask or an identity that we wear in social situations to navigate the world.
Mhm.
It helps us kind of feel solid enough to face this incredible world in all its variety, especially the social world for humans. And so we use this persona to identify ourselves as individuals. But here's the thing, that we start to believe our own branding, right? The persona is like our
Yeah.
brand, and we start to think that's really who I am, this persona that I built up to live in the world, when in reality, there's a deeper, truer self that we need to get to.
That's a good point, because when Cheryl said, they're running from me, it's kind of like when that happens, when we're in a relationship and they run away, we think our persona, there's something wrong with it. We have to fix the persona. We have to, hold back from asking for what we want. We have to do things that are feel uncomfortable for us in order for someone not to leave. And I think for you, Cheryl, I would really like to invite you to think about, what would it be like if someone completely wanted to commit to you? What would be the downside of that? What would be like, because you've had experiences of being abandoned, so what that feels like, someone leaving and not committing. And so invite yourself to just like spend some time just imagining being in a house, living with someone day after day, being committed. And I want you to notice if there starts to feel a little like, there's something resisting there. Like, oh, and we have our clients sometimes think about that vision. They go, oh my God, and then I'm going to have to deal with their family, and so we all want what we can't have, but then when we have what we want, we end up not wanting it either. So it's really this idea of being clear on what we want.
Yeah.
And another attribute of the lover is that she sometimes, what would be your experience of some of our clients who had the lover type?
Yeah, I think at the personal level, they think they want love, and that they're going to experience it by finding somebody that complements their persona. They think that,
Compatibility.
yeah, that
Yeah.
if I find somebody that fits my lifestyle and goes with my apartment or my house and my car and the way I live, I'll be happy. Now, there's nothing wrong with that idea. Obviously, it's compatibility, like you said. But that's not really how love works. You have to dig deeper into yourself to find who you really are outside or beyond the persona.
So you didn't answer my question. What is the type? What have you seen in clients with the lover type?
Yeah, so that's the type, essentially, that they think they're going to find happiness, love
In the man.
in finding
Oh, okay.
somebody that matches that external persona.
Yes.
But at the same time, unconsciously, they're pushing love away.
Yeah. So it's a conflict.
Yes,
They want it, but they don't.
yes, because the lover wants their freedom. They want to be able to fall in love again and again and again.
Mhm.
And if they find a person that's really calls their bluff, in
They're
essence,
stuck.
yeah, they run. Basically, they find a way to sabotage it or say, it just didn't work out, or I fell out of love.
Yeah, I remember, and you don't even realize you're caught in this trap, but I remember when I was younger, I was so focused on meeting a man, meeting a man, meeting a man. And one of my girlfriends I work with, she goes, "I've never met a person more boy crazy than you." And when I found out about these types, these are based on Tony Wolf's feminine archetypes. I was thinking, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
That's why because we have this conflict, like you said, we want to be committed, but we don't want to be committed. And so what some typical experiences you'll find, and I'm sure you have with Cheryl, I'm sure the men have been ambivalent. They don't know what they want. You can't figure them out. They're not concrete. And they're reflecting back your inability to say, this is what I want. This is where I want what I want in my life. And there's this hesitation to commit. And so many women fall into this type and they don't realize it. They think, oh, I'm totally committed. I totally want a relationship. But the lover type is I think where you're at. And we do have ways for you to figure that out. And there's some links below if you want to find out more about that. But it really is, think about the world that you're seeing with the patterns and relationships are reflecting something
Yes.
about you.
Can I give her at least a little bit of advice on how
Sure.
to move forward?
You sure can. I'll let you.
So the good news is this, that because the external is reflecting our internal psyche, the external is essentially showing you the pattern, right? It's showing you what's inside your mind. It's in, Jung says the internal conflict becomes the external conflict. So for you, the external conflict is that you meet these guys and then they drop off at a certain point. That is an internal conflict being projected outward. So now, if you observe these situations in the right context, meaning you're seeing them for what they are, you're seeing them as opportunities to see your internal conflict in living color, right? They're playing it out for you. Now you can move forward, because now you can ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen? Why am I so frustrated by this pattern? What is it that I fear? What is it that I'm running away from? And it's all right there in that emotion that comes up when you look at the pattern.
Yes. And again, I want to drill this down to all of you, is that it's not something you're doing in the relation. It's not about your behavior. It's not that if you act cooler or if you acted more open, putting on a different persona. That's really a lot of the dating tips. Please throw the dating tip rule book out, because it's really just creating another persona that's not real. And what you want to do is go into a relationship and be totally yourself and say, this is who I am. This is what I want, and be unapologetic. I mean, not to be harsh and bossy, but I think there's something about when you hold you really believe that you deserve to be treated a certain way. You honor yourself and you speak up and express the things you want. There's something very powerful and lovable about that. And so it's a really great filter for people who don't want to kind of step up and be in a relationship. So why not be, who you are? Now, of course, you don't want to do it as a manipulation tool and change behavior. So you really need to go deep within yourself and find the core of what is really happening on a deeper level. And that's through the emotion. The emotion helps you go in and face those fears that you're afraid of with love.
Yeah, the formula is very simple. What you're doing is you're making the unconscious conscious, meaning instead of letting that emotional imprint that we received as children run your whole life, your whole, the pattern essentially is coming up from that emotional pattern that's imprinted. Instead of doing that, what you're doing is you're letting light into the unconscious mind. You're observing it. You're letting it you're seeing it in the right context, in the right perspective, and that changes the whole game. Then you're able to create the kind of relationships that you want in a conscious way.
Yeah. And that's, I think for you, like, what do you think your biggest realization of that was in relationships?
For me personally,
Hmm.
um, I think, the hardest part is you get to a point where you realize you're creating your own suffering.
Ah, yes.
You're creating your own suffering, and accepting that little piece is so hard sometimes. You
Mm.
want to blame other people. You want to blame destiny. You want to say life is unfair, love is unfair, well, all those things, right? But you have to accept full responsibility for it. And you
Yeah,
have
we
to
often
say,
want to project that onto other
yeah,
people.
yeah.
They're the ones who broke my heart. They're the ones who are the bad one, and we are creating our own suffering. That's really beautiful, Rob. Thank you
Oh,
for sharing.
I try.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us for our very first podcast. We will have more to come this month. Do you have a relationship question you want us to answer? Simply like or follow us on Facebook to submit your question, or email us at podcast@empoweryr.com. So you can go to empoweryr.com on Facebook and say hello to us, and find out more, post a question. We'd love to interact with you more and get your questions answered about love, relationships, and living your best life. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you next time.
See you
Take
next
care.
time. Take care.